Hey folks, welcome back to another episode of Peach Pundit Podcast with Jason Pye, joined as always by Scott Turner and Boston Brockway. Buzz Brockway.
Boston might make an appearance too, who knows?
Well, Boston made an appearance in the meeting beforehand, that's for sure. You guys might notice I'm in a different location this week. I am in Phoenix, Arizona. I am playing a little music this week, which I never get to do. It's kind of hard to do. As I mentioned, I'm recovering from a sinus infection. I have my right ear is completely stopped up. Actually, the first thing I did when I got off the plane yesterday was go to an urgent care to get a prescription for amoxicillin, so I could start getting this resolving by Friday when I'm supposed to actually play publicly. And it sucks. I would rather have a broken leg than a stopped up ear any day of the week. And I know that sounds. I mean, Scott's like, no, I get it. I get it, man. I get it.
Yeah, I do.
Nasty stuff.
Yeah, it's not my favorite thing in the world, but initially I wasn't going to do this, but now I am here and it's too late to turn back now. So we actually have a pretty good list of stuff to talk about today. The first things first, Governor Brian Kemp went to the border to see what was going on there. And this was, I think, with other governors from around the country who visited the southern border to see what was going on. Scott, I'll go to you first here. What's the takeaway from this? What does Brian Kemp hope to learn from visiting the border?
Well, I think he's trying to model leadership by example for Kamala Harris, who's been saying for months now that she'd go and hasn't gone, and to go and take a firsthand perspective of what's happening down there. You know, the Biden administration at one point told a local news station they were not allowed to fly their drones overhead anymore, which potentially a First Amendment violation there for the freedom of the press. So the people locally there in the TV media got in a sheriff's helicopter and flew over and took some video, and it was pretty startling what they were seeing. At the time, there were thousands of Haitians camping out under a bridge near the border and streaming back and forth. Some of them had to-go canisters of food, as was pointed out by some activists. So there were obviously some sort of support structure in place. And I think the governor went to take a look firsthand. It also presented an opportunity for him to criticize the Biden administration for not acting on the crisis at the border and not treating it with the amount of attention that it really needs to be treated with at the moment. And it was a photo op for him to stand in coalition and solidarity with other governors who are concerned about what's happening down there. It's a humanitarian crisis. I mean, regardless of whether you're from the right or the left, there are people who are suffering down there right now based upon policy decisions that have been made by the Biden administration. And he's not doing anything about it. So, you could be pro or against immigration. It doesn't really matter. What's happening right now to these people, because of the promise or false promise of the Biden administration that there would be some sort of action taken to allow them to enter the country, they're there and they're not being well taken care of. There's no facilities. There's no place to sleep safely. Something's happening down there, and somebody had to go check it out because the Biden administration isn't.
Yeah. Buzz?
I think Scott nailed it well. I think one funny story was the governor of Idaho was there too. And so apparently while he was out of the state, the lieutenant governor of Idaho decided that she would do some things that she wanted to do. She's a fellow Republican, so she immediately ordered that there shall be no mask mandates anywhere in the state of Idaho, and that the Idaho National Guard is to be dispatched to the Texas border. So the sitting governor of Idaho said, "No, when I get back in town, we'll rescind those orders." So apparently, this is the second time that she has done stuff like this. The governor leaves the state, and she decides she's in charge and starts doing stuff. So,
I mean, YOLO.
Which is not how this works, right?
Yeah.
Thankfully, Jeff Duncan did not take that approach while Governor Kemp was in Texas and start, making moves on his own. So,
well, Lieutenant Governor Duncan is what I like to call sane. So, but I mean, one of the things, like Scott, you had said that this was something that was created by the policies of the Biden administration, but we had sort of human caravans of people coming up during Trump. We had them during Obama. It does seem. I was just going to say, it does seem to me that this is a policy crisis that no one party owns.
Well, in this particular case, narrowing it down to this latest example of people crushing the border, we saw one specific nationality coming to the border, and those were Haitians in this example. We've seen multicultural, multinational caravans in the past based upon other types of policy decisions made by other administrations. But in this particular case, the Biden administration had specifically said that they were not going to be deporting Haitians. And so Haitians crushed the border. So that was a direct response. And then there was some backtracking on that, which led to the backlog of people standing there thinking they were going to be able to enter legally. And ultimately, some of them made the decision to take matters in their own hands and cross illegally. But the people who are not crossing are the ones who I'm concerned about on that humanitarian crisis issue and that are there right now. So yeah, you are right. That this seems to be something that does plague
hold on. Can you say those words again?
With the caveat of you are right that this does plague every administration, but you can point to the direct policy this time, the decision that was made by the Biden administration that led to this one specifically. Yeah. Okay. So that's my point.
Well, so it's interesting that this comes. I mean, well, I guess I should further flesh this out, because the immigration issue is one that's not going away. And for the longest time, I was of the mind that the issue kept coming up because it's such a wedge issue for the right. Democrats kept pushing immigration as a way to sort of divide the right, because there are Republicans who support immigration reform. Going back, remember the stuff in 2007 when they kept saying no amnesty, and that got Chambliss and Isaacson to back off the immigration reform push. Then it happened again in 2013, I think. And there, for the longest time, Democrats pushed the issue, but I was one of the people who didn't think they were very serious about it, because while it's a wedge issue for conservatives and Republicans, big labor does not want immigration reform. They say they do, but they don't. Not really.
It's a wedge issue on the left too, right?
Right. But it's increasingly not becoming a wedge issue, because I think we always talk about messaging bills. Like HR 1 is a good example of this. HR 1 is, for all intents and purposes, a messaging bill. It was never meant to become law. But you do something and you say something enough where you start to actually believe it, and you start to actually try to seriously push it. Where I think, because Bernie Sanders said this back during the presidential race, that I don't support open borders. That's a Koch brothers position, referencing David Koch's run for the Libertarian Party vice president. Mm-hmm. Well, he was the Libertarian Party's vice presidential nominee in 1980. And that's been a longstanding Libertarian Party position of essentially open borders. But you have someone like Bernie Sanders who says that, basically acknowledging to the left that labor unions don't like it. And I don't know. It's really interesting that we're now entering this phase where, I don't know. It's like nobody realizes that or talks about that anymore. It's just Republicans are racist, and I certainly do think that Republicans have a prejudice towards immigrants who come from certain countries. That's just my opinion, Scott.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're looking at two Republicans that don't fit that mold. So
it's a generalization. I'm not being specific to you two.
But I can't help but, if I proudly carry the moniker Republican, I can't help but chafe a little bit when somebody makes a generalization like
Scott,
that.
we all have our faults. It's okay. So
Yep, trust me, I've realized that too.
But I don't know. It just seems I don't know. I just remember the days of Republicans when it became, we just don't like illegal immigration, but now there's the party's increasingly, we don't want any more immigration, and that's frustrating to me. We don't have to spend a lot of time.
Certainly, on this, look, it was the powerful factor in the rise of Trump, the perception that the border was in chaos, and Trump, look, he said things that really are hard to argue with, and that, by saying, if there's not a border, then we don't have a country. And that played to a lot of people's thoughts, and brought, it's definitely a key issue for his most ardent supporters. And that's funny. He hasn't. I did watch. Since, so y'all don't have to. I watched all of his rally in Georgia. I went back and watched the video, and there were references, he was back to saying some of the same things about how we need to build a wall. And he didn't say Mexico would pay for it this time, and maybe Haiti will pay for it now. But he was back to that kind of rhetoric because now the issue is back out there because of this humanitarian crisis that Scott referenced that's taken place at the border now. So, I mean, it's in you would think politically it's in Democrats' best interest to take care of this issue and put this issue to bed so that it doesn't help fuel the rise of Trump again in 2024 or aid Republicans in the midterm elections next year.
Yeah. Well, I guess speaking
That's
of
part
elections,
of why Kemp was down there, right?
Yeah,
well,
that's exactly why.
Speaking of elections, I mean, so we are on the cusp of a midterm election. Brian Kemp is running for re-election. We don't know who his Democrat's going to be still. Here it is in October 2021, excuse me. And over the weekend, or I guess not over the weekend, late last week, Thursday, the Cobb County Republican Party passed a resolution censuring Brian Kemp for not living up to his promises when he was running for governor. He promised to crack down on illegal immigration, do all sorts of things. And I am pretty convinced at this point that most Republicans, or at least, well, I shouldn't say most, many Republicans do not care about winning elections anymore. Tell me I'm wrong.
Well, I think they will say that they want it. Let's limit ourselves to the kinds of Republicans who supported this resolution in Cobb County. In their minds, they're putting principle above all else. But you're right. I mean, as far as, is this a winning issue for Republicans to be censuring their own governor? No, it's not.
So, you started out by saying most, and then you backtracked and said many. I don't know how big the many number is.
Sure, some could have been more appropriate.
Well, I mean, there are some, right? And I believe that the some think that they're most. I think that they believe that they do make up the majority, but
and that they're speaking to, when they pass these kind of resolutions. At my county convention, they attempted to do this. Me and others were able to successfully block it. It wasn't on this issue. It was just a general condemnation of Kemp for failing to ensure the re-election of Donald Trump somehow. But they passed one at the district convention that was just a month later. So and they absolutely think, to Scott's point, that they are speaking to the vast majority of Georgians, that they're showing leadership, that the public is going to rise up and applaud these sorts of things. Sorry, Scott, I interrupted you.
No, that's exactly right. I mean, you added detail into the bones of the argument I was making there, but we can point to specific examples of pushback against Cobb County from organized Republicans to show that there is not a unified message here. Cobb County Republican Party may feel this way, but the former chairman of that county party, Jason Shepherd, who recently ran for the statewide GOP chair and did not make it, he very publicly resigned from the Cobb County GOP. He spoke out against it. He said it was procedurally in error. He pointed to Robert's Rules of Order, saying you cannot discipline somebody who's not a direct member of your organization. In this case, while Brian Kemp is a Republican, he's not a Cobb County Republican specifically. He's a Georgia Republican, and therefore they had no authority or jurisdiction to issue a censure. That was his point. And if you're into Robert's Rules of Order, you can probably argue those finer points. However, he used evidence that we are not united in our contempt or wishing to see Brian Kemp held accountable by the party in this example, that it's not the party's job, frankly, to be holding individual officers for office accountable. That's up to the voters. I mean, the party structure is there to get Republicans elected. Now, if that last sentence annoyed you, that's what your purpose is. If you're an activist in the Republican Party, is to get Republicans elected once they're nominated. There are other people we'll talk about segue into the next topic, where they think that the existence of the party is to hold people accountable to some principle that's only defined by them.
Well, there's a couple other things because I want to read part of what Jason, and I think we all know Jason.
Yes.
And he's a good guy. But
I think if I could make one quick point, Jason Shepherd, just so that people don't think, if they don't know him, that he's some sort of rhino, moderate squish. When Jason ran for state party chairman, he was running as trying to be more pro-Trump than David Schaefer was, and even accepted the endorsement of Miss Kraken, her name, Sidney Powell.
Yeah.
So no, this is not a guy who was, one of these, rhino moderate squishes like me. This is a guy who has fully embraced Trump.
Yeah. And so part of what Jason told the Marietta Daily Journal, for his resignation, he said, part of it's just a complete lack of understanding of our system of government, which as Republicans, we're the ones who constantly say that we understand how government works. But now we're censuring our elected officials for things they cannot do. And I'm not going to be a part of an organization that does that. And so there's two things I want to unpack there. The first one is the failure of understanding how government works. For years, I stopped listening to talk radio about 10 years ago. I haven't watched cable news in 6 or 7 years, except for extraordinary events. I'll turn it on during like an extraordinary event or something.
Like January 6th.
January 6th, the killing of the Quds Force leader last year. I watched some during that. I remember listening to Sean Hannity like on my ride home from work, 2005, 2006, something like that. And he would talk about low information voters, or Neil Boortz, maybe it was Neil Boortz, who talked about low information voters. And I'm not saying that either side is worse than the other, but Republicans have really succumbed to that now, where they are quickly, I shouldn't say, this is another generalization, Scott, I'm sorry. But where they are, by and large, and this is subjective because I see it on my Facebook page, posting things that are like blatantly not true, and saying it's true to try to create this narrative or be part of this narrative of alternative facts or whatever it is. I don't know. I mean, it's just, I don't know. Like I remember hearing, like, back when Trump got impeached the first time, people were saying, well, if he's impeached, that means he can run for a third term. It's like, no, it doesn't. The Constitution doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's the kind of stuff I was hearing. It's just like read the Constitution. The Constitution is pretty clear on this. You can serve 2 terms, a maximum of 10 years. That's it.
Yeah. There were MAGA scholars who were putting that notion out there, just like they were that.
So you heard it too. I'm not the only one who heard that. Okay.
And so point to the law in U.S. code or the Constitution that allows that, and
right. And nothing supersedes the Constitution,
right?
At least in theory.
The only thing I'll point out is I'm glad you said generalization, and that might be your perspective based on social media, and I couldn't argue with how you got there. However, you point to people like we're in the middle of a conversation about a guy who just resigned a position within a county party because of the stance that they took, and is widely regarded as a very solid conservative activist leader in Republican activist circles. So I don't know, I don't want to fall into this trap that we see with social media creating the narrative.
Sure.
Right? Just because it's trending on Twitter doesn't mean it's important. And just because somebody says that the earth is flat doesn't make it true. And it doesn't mean that the majority of human beings believe that, or even close. You could say in some cases, many people believe the earth is flat. Yes, some people do. And many, depending on how you define many, it doesn't make it true, and it doesn't make it widely acceptable. And that's what I think, the point of adding this to the agenda for this podcast was to talk about Jason and his reaction.
Yeah.
And then, to talk about the back and forth that we're seeing, the debate that's happening now within the party, and explore that a little more.
Well, the other thing that I do think is worth discussing, although Brian Kemp went to the border, there is very little that a governor can do to address federal immigration policy.
Correct.
All things considered, Georgia
However,
already has a very aggressive immigration law that was passed and signed into law under Governor Deal in like what, 2011, 2012.
Well, yep.
So that's an Arizona style law. It's already been addressed. It's already been done. I don't know what else Brian Kemp can do.
Well, I think what you see Brian Kemp doing is raising awareness and visibility of the issue, which is what a governor can do. You have a bully pulpit in which you can draw attention to issues, and that's what he's doing.
Sure.
You know, he can, you know, our system of government is set up so that the federal government serves the interests of the states. And as governor of a state in this union, he is trying to get the attention of the federal government to say, we need you to start dealing with this.
So,
and I think too, I mean, I don't know what all will come out of these discussions that these governors are having, but Governor Abbott of Texas has made it clear that he intends to, if, you know, in his words, if Joe Biden won't protect the border, then I will. And I suspect that part of the conversation that's going on there is governors like Kemp saying, how can we help? And maybe that includes sending Georgia National Guard there to assist. You know, I don't know. We'll see what comes of it. But and I think that's a great idea. Is if the federal government is going to fail to do something, then states should, and it should be flipped. This should be reversed. States should be taking the lead on all sorts of issues, and let the federal government react as fall behind and not take the lead on so much stuff.
So one of the things, so the Cobb County Young Republicans, they condemn the Cobb County Republican Party's censure. I think the Georgia Young Republicans did as well, Scott, if I recall correctly.
So this is what happens, right? So this is sort of our next subtopics all wrapped up into one because it's all related. The Cobb YRs, which is one of the more active, longer standing Young Republican. When we say YR, we mean Young Republican chapters. It's official organization. No, Young Republican is not an oxymoron. There are young people who are Republicans and they organize and they get together and they drink beer and they talk politics. It's awesome. It's
as long as they're over 21.
Yeah. Well, yes. We also have the Teenage Republicans, which is also not an oxymoron. There are teenage Republicans for those who don't like to drink. However, that being said, when they're of age, they get together in pubs like our founding fathers did. They knock back a pint and they talk about how bad the Biden administration is and how awesome Governor Kemp is, apparently, because they had a very negative reaction to the Cobb County GOP trying to censure Governor Kemp. They actually condemned the action publicly. They issued a press release and made public statements, posted all over their social media, which is not something we saw from our own state party leadership, but the YRs took it upon themselves to do this.
Reading from the statement, Governor Kemp is one of the greatest governors our state has had. He has championed and signed some of the most conservative legislation, including the heartbeat bill, which he is continuing to fight for in court today. Governor Kemp kept our state open so business owners and hardworking Georgians could provide for their families. The governor and first lady have worked tirelessly towards the end of human trafficking while fighting for the rights of victims. Their leadership has kept us the number one state to do business 8 years in a row. It's clear they deeply care about each citizen in the state, and I'm proud to support them. And that's from Brittany Ellison, the political director of the Cobb County YRs.
And so we saw that reaction met with the reaction of one Alex Johnson over the weekend, sent an email to his widely dispersed email list towards Republican activists.
We should explain who Alex Johnson is for those who aren't.
I've been talking a lot, Buzz. You probably would be more diplomatic in your description than I would be.
So Alex Johnson has run for state party chairman several times. He's an activist. At one point in time, he lived in DeKalb County. He may still live there. I'm not sure. But he is presently the chairman of an organization called the Georgia Republican Assembly, which bills itself as the Republican wing of the Republican Party. And it's a national organization. This is the Georgia chapter. They essentially are folks who are a lot like Alex Johnson, have a similar view, which I think Scott will explain, kind of where their worldview on stuff. But the second vice chair of the state party, Brant Frost, is one of the officers. So they are integrally entwined with the Republican Party and attempting to pull the party in the direction that they want it to go.
Yeah, which is a direction where they believe that they are the only ones who have principles. They are the only ones who actually are Republicans. The rest of us are rhinos if you're not a member of their organization. And that the purpose of the party is to hold elected Republicans accountable for things that they think are right or wrong, right? So they become the judge, the judge and jury on whether or not a Republican has maintained their Republican credentials while they're in office. The problem with that is that they are sort of extreme in their views, and they don't represent the electorate, the Republican electorate as a whole. They don't even represent the Republican Party as a whole, which is why they have their own organization. They don't even have a majority. Otherwise, there would be no need for GRA. So they're a minority within the minority, and they want to amplify their voice. Their response, Alex wrote this email where he said that the people who are speaking out now, asking for, condemning the actions of the state party, basically, for
Cobb County Party.
Yeah. The Cobb County Party and the state party.
Yeah.
Because he talked about how there are Republicans who, in his words, want to wipe away the memory of Trump and that they're being selfish. Well, that wasn't the case at all. The criticism that came after the Trump rally down in Perry had nothing to do with trying to erase Trump. It had to do with reacting to what Trump said. Right. We had a lot of people, I mean a lot of people, who were very upset when Donald Trump said that we'd be better off under Stacey Abrams. I could show you the text messages that I received, and I have showed you some of them privately without naming anybody about with some of the stuff that I've received after I wrote the article saying I don't need somebody from out of state telling me that I need Stacey Abrams over Brian Kemp. And that mentality is much more widely accepted than what Alex Johnson's trying to push. But he actually used the words that the people who are pushing back now want a civil war within the Republican Party. Well, that's what Alex Johnson's been trying to accomplish for years. Whether or not he has stated that as his goal is irrelevant. It's been his goal based upon the natural outcome of the actions that he has taken over the years. This is exactly what you wanted, Mr. Johnson. Congratulations, you finally got it. And now you're trying to point fingers of blame at everybody else. Well, let me tell you something. Brian Kemp is going to be the nominee for the Republican Party for governor of Georgia. He's going to secure that nomination with ease. And you better be on board, or otherwise I'm going to be out there with a big old picture of Rhino marching around in front of wherever your office is. Because somebody needs to we need a course correction here where these people are allowed to have a microphone and a soapbox through social media and through whatever other means, and they don't represent the party in the broader sense. The people who show up to these party meetings, you have to understand, I am really glad you're here, right? I'm so excited that you are engaged and we have volunteers, but there are thousands of other people in ratio compared to you that pull a Republican ticket who don't believe exactly the way that you do. When I was elected in office, I had 25,000 people roughly that I was trying to get to vote for me every single time, not 10. And about 10 people in my district belong to the GRA. I am not going to kowtow the 10 and sacrifice the interests of the other 24,990. It's not going to happen. I have to govern in a way that is representative of the entire community that I represent, not just a handful of really noisy people. And that's what you have to understand. At the end of the day, the party does not exist to punish me. It exists so that we can have a co-equal relationship in trying to advance Republican principles. And those principles are defined not by the people who show up on Saturday morning, and I'm sorry that it's not. It's by the people who show up in the voting booth every election.
So this is, go ahead, Jason.
Well, I was gonna say, so just, I mean, like, it's like looking at this email, this is a grift. Please, as someone who's worked in center-right politics professionally for 10 years, I have developed a keen eye on what is and what is not a grift. This is a grift. And Alex Johnson, because I remember maybe not 5 years ago, but like several years ago, he was Mr. sort of Ron Paul Republican.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, and he's now shifted to being a Trump Republican. You look at his email, like one of the things in here is like, one of it's big red, underline and italics. Sadly, unless you act to point out their hypocrisy and support the principal activists, they will win. You must make sure your friends are aware of this and that they get involved. One thing to do is apply to join his group to be organized locally. It's a like that's a grift. Like, and I've never seen someone fight so hard to become part of the establishment he loathes so much. Like, just shut up. Like, you have a right to do what you want to do. Like, and keep doing it. Yeah, I mean, sure, whatever. Like, if you want to, but like, I'm going to be sitting here pointing out to people that what you're doing is solely for your own ego, and that's it. That's it. Like, I'm not questioning whether you care. You very well might care, but at the end of the day, you're doing this to get attention, and it's a grift.
So, I mean, this whole debate that Scott hit upon and that you've talked about too, Jason, that what's the job of the party? Is the job of the party to hold elected officials' feet to the fire, or to get people elected? I think that debate's been around a long time. I remember 10 years ago or so, legislators receiving letters from their local county party instructing them that they were to provide detailed reports of all the activities of the legislature on a weekly basis and report it to and how they voted on each one and why to their county county Republican Party. I don't know a single legislator who bothered to do that.
Well, you had certain legislators tweet every vote, or
they do that on their own. They don't do that under the instruction, in compliance with a demand from their local Republican Party. They do that on their own. There have been other things like that. There's been a lot of people who've said, well, if somebody doesn't agree with every single item in the Republican Party platform, they should be expelled from the party and they should not be elected to office. Well, Trump never would have got elected in the first place if he held to that standard. And
didn't even have a party platform in his second and his reelected. He didn't even bother with having a platform.
Right. But I think all of these debates really, I think, when I was a county party leader, my answer to all these sorts of things was, we have a primary system. The people whose job it is to enforce the Republican platform, to hold the feet to the fire of the elected officials are the voters. And they are the ones who will decide whether the candidate X or politician Y is sufficiently Republican for their tastes. And our job, and that's why I completely agree with Scott. The job of the Republican Party, I thought this when I was the county party chairman, our job was to let the voters pick the nominee, and then we work like heck to get them elected. And I held my nose and fought for people who weren't my preferred choices many a time. But that's what you do if you're going to have a broad party, a coalition party like the Republican Party and the Democratic Party is. They're coalitions of all sorts of people with all different viewpoints. If you're going to have that coalition party, well, then you have to accept whoever the voters pick, and you don't have to like it, and you can take your ball and go home if you want to, but you can't stand up and say, well, you must do it my way or the highway, because then you're not part of a coalition. Look, somehow I'm on Debbie Dooley's emails again. She's blocked me on all social media, but somehow I started getting her emails again, and she says she's in this vein, saying everything Trump said at that rally was A-OK, and that she will never ever vote for Brian Kemp under any circumstance.
Rhino.
Well, yeah, then you're not part of a party.
Right. We've seen, listen, for those who don't know who Debbie Dooley is, she claims to be one of the founders of the Tea Party movement here in Georgia and therefore nationally. And but since then, she's gone off the rails in many different ways, primarily by taking on this solar energy, green Al Gore / effort to end nuclear power.
The
Green Tea Party, whatever. Yeah. Very liberal environmentalist type of anti-Republican organization that she has started. And she recently supported a Democrat who ran for PSC against a sitting Republican who was sitting on the Public Service Commission. So she has no credentials or she has no ground to stand on and calling other people rhinos at all.
Yeah, I don't know how much influence she has in Republican circles anymore. However, she was on TV as 11 Alive was interviewing Jason Shepherd to get his take on things.
Sure.
Who did they call? Debbie Dooley. Of course,
because
so they know she is on television all the time.
Right. But
putting herself out there as a leader.
How much influence does she have? And I can point demonstrably and tell you none, because in that email that you mentioned that went out over the weekend, she names me in the article I posted on Peach Pundit called More Thoughts on Perry specifically. And she quoted from it. And then she condemned other people for sharing it who are Republican activists. Now, if
nobody seems scared,
if anybody had, if I just got one email or phone call or text telling me that they heard from Debbie Dooley and I was wrong, then I would tell you about it. But I received zero. The only thing I received after she sent her emails were attaboys and thank yous. And I don't know what she's talking about. I read the article and it was really good. Or you expressed my thoughts exactly how I'm thinking. There were dozens and dozens, more than 10, more than 20, more than 30 of types of those responses that I got through various means, the email or phone calls or text. The reaction was overwhelmingly positive to what I wrote.
Yeah.
So I can tell you that if she thinks that her emails are reaching home with anybody, they're not, because the type of person that she used to have influence with, I guarantee you I would have heard from them.
Go ahead, Scott. I'm sorry.
But I didn't. That's it.
That first Tea Party that they had February 2009, I was actually there.
Me too.
Me too.
Yeah. And I went on Fox News later that day to.
You were wearing a capitalist shirt.
I was. Enjoy capitalism.
Yeah, I remember.
I also weighed like 350 pounds at the time too. So
you did. Mm-hmm.
I was a big fella. I was a hoss, as they would say.
Mountain of a man.
Yeah. But no, I mean, like there are three people who were involved in that rally who have since become three of the most self-serving charlatans who I've ever met. And I'm not going to, I mean, we're talking about one of them, but the other two I'm not going to name. But if they watch this, I certainly hope they know I'm talking about them.
They do. You don't have to name them. We know who you're talking about too.
Yeah. I mean, it became a money-making scheme. That's all. It became an attention and money-making scheme. And that's why I got the hell out of it within like a month after.
And it's a real shame because look, I think you see this in movements that spring up. People come out of the woodwork to attach themselves to it and make money off of it and grift off of it. And that certainly happened to the Tea Party, but it strayed away. I mean, if it had stuck to what its original stated purposes were, which were to attempt to, and you have to remember what was going on at that time. We were heading into a recession, and the answer from government, from George Bush and from Barack Obama, was to spend insane amounts of money, which pale in comparison to what we're doing now, what Trump and Biden have done. But I think we would have been a lot better off if they had stuck true to that and said, this is what we're going to do. They could have built a broad bipartisan movement that could have actually had some real, perhaps made some structural change to the way Washington goes about its fiscal business.
I mean, there's no such, I mean, we got some structural change in August of 2011 with the passage of the Budget Control Act, but that got dismantled every couple of years. They had set spending caps. Remember this, and this kind of feeds into our next topic a little bit, but amazing how that works. So
good segue.
Great segue. So it's really weird how this all played out. So Congress, so the Americans elect a Republican House in 2010, and then 2011, you have Speaker John Boehner. You have a debate over the debt ceiling, much like you have now, and you have Boehner who starts negotiating behind the scenes with Barack Obama for what they call the grand bargain, basically a number of spending cuts and revenue enhancements. That all falls apart, and they get instead the Budget Control Act, which was a bipartisan vote. This had an increase in the debt ceiling, or a suspension of the debt ceiling, I should say, and cuts to discretionary spending.
Right.
but that was in lieu of this budget commission that was supposed to come up with spending cuts and if they didn't get those, there would be an automatic sequester. So they didn't get those spending cuts agreed to in that commission. So these automatic cuts kicked in. We're going to cut about
sequestration, right? Wasn't that the term, sequestration?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, sequestration. So you had $1.2 trillion in cuts that were supposed to take place over 10 years. But the thing is, starting just months after, I guess it started at the beginning of 2013. You had automatic spending cuts coming up, and you had the Bush tax cuts were about to expire.
Right.
So they cut a deal to stave off some of the spending cuts, and then to also basically raise taxes on people making $400,000 or more. And then every couple of years they did it again. So they did it again in 15. They did it again in 17, which was the biggest increase in non-defense, or excuse me, in discretionary spending. And they did it again in, I think, 19. And they just kept getting rid of the spending cuts and pushing them off. And
right.
And that's the thing, like, because we got to think about this from the budgetary perspective, is that there are basically 4 buckets of federal spending. There's mandatory spending, which is entitlements, as Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, federal health benefits for government workers, military benefits, things like that. There's defense discretionary spending, which funds the Defense Department and our wars and things like that. There is non-defense discretionary spending, and then there's interest on the debt. So mandatory spending is the biggest bucket. Is about 60 to 65% of all federal spending, depending on the year. And then I think interest on the debt's like 8 to 10%, depending on the year. Everything else is discretionary spending. It's about 30% of all federal spending, something like that.
Right.
So that's what we argue about. Every time they're talking about appropriations,
right,
the possibility of a government shutdown, we're talking about 30 to 35% of all federal spending in any given year.
And that's part of why guys like Paul Ryan were saying we have to address entitlement spending.
Right.
And he worked incredibly hard, had all sorts of things. Now, these days he's a pariah and whatnot, but he was right.
Yeah, he was. I mean, and so speaking of which, I actually found, going through some old photos the other day, a picture of me in a meeting with Paul Ryan. I posted it on Instagram. He was such a nice guy. Still is such a nice guy.
Should have listened to him. We all should have listened to him.
But that brings me to where we're at right now, because government funding has been taken care of. That's done. So they're funded. They funded the government until like early December. So they're going to do probably an omnibus or another continuing resolution come December. Again, 30% of the federal government. That's what we're talking about.
Right.
What's going on right now is this debate over the debt limit. The debt limit. So Congress has been operating under the suspension of the debt limit since, I don't know, I want to say like 2011, 2013, something like that. Where basically for those of you who don't know, there's a statutory amount of how much the federal government can borrow. It's actually set in statute, but Congress has suspended it, which basically is a blank check to the Treasury to borrow. Right. And so the last budget agreement that passed, they suspended the debt limit again until July 31st of 2021. So that we have shot through that window.
Right.
And what the Treasury has been doing to pay our debts is using what we call extraordinary measures, which basically means borrowing against trust funds that exist, that government has control over. So that's federal and retirement benefits. That's Social Security.
Sounds like a great plan.
And that's a number of other things to try to get us through this time until extraordinary measures are exhausted. And they will be exhausted on Monday, October 18th. For those of you who don't follow the congressional schedule, the House of Representatives is out of session right now until Tuesday, October 19th.
Oh, crap.
They're going to come back. They're going to have to come back because McConnell has routinely said, he's been saying since the summer that this was going to come up and that Republicans were not going to vote with Democrats to suspend the debt limit. That he's been saying that for months, and the Senate has tried at least 2 times I'm aware of, maybe 3.
So, Jason, can I ask? This is a good time, I think, to ask a question. And my question is, Republicans have been voting to extend the debt limit when Trump was president, right? So what's different now?
What's different now is that you have Democrats we have spent about $5 trillion, almost $6 trillion in response to COVID-19. And that includes the $1.9 trillion bill they passed back in February. So Democrats are currently trying to ram through another reconciliation bill that has a top end price tag of $3.5 trillion being done through budget reconciliation. Buzz and I went through this on a podcast you weren't on a couple months ago.
Yep.
And I won't go back through that whole process again because it's really
just from a political standpoint.
I'm getting changed. So the McConnell's basically saying Republicans are not going to sign off on, because if we have to vote for this, if we vote for this, that means we're basically approving or saying we agree with what Democrats are doing. McConnell has a point there.
So it's all about the $3.5 trillion bill, right?
Right. So it's like McConnell views it as hypocritical to say that we don't support this, but we're going to vote to increase our credit card limit for you to buy it.
Yeah.
And that is an argument that I happen to agree with. I also think you have to increase the debt limit too. Or I mean, I'm not on board with suspending it. I didn't like suspending it when they did it in previous years, including when Trump was there. But if you don't increase the debt limit, and the debt limit conversation is one that's it's just like reconciliation is really kind of difficult to explain because the Treasury can prioritize payments. So we don't default on the payments that matter.
Right.
We can prioritize payments as revenues come in. That's true. But if the Treasury mishandles it or if they prioritize wrongly and we default, it could affect our bond rating, which will ultimately affect our interest rates, which means federal spending goes up. Not only that the cost of borrowing for every single American goes up.
Yeah.
Because all that stuff's inextricably linked.
So McConnell today said that he was open to a small extension of the debt limit to do certain things so that the government doesn't default, but not everything the Democrats want, and that would enable them to pass the $3.5 trillion bill.
That's right. So McConnell's been trying to get them to reopen the budget reconciliation process to do it through reconciliation. Democrats don't want to do that because they would have to give a hard number rather than just suspending the debt limit. So what they are doing instead is McConnell has basically said, given them another out because he realizes the importance of this. And what he has said is we're open to a short-term increase in the debt limit to get us through to some point in December, and where we'll have this conversation again. That is what McConnell's saying. Democrats have accepted that offer, at least so it seems. So we will probably have some action on a debt limit increase, most likely not a suspension in the short term. Maybe it is a suspension, I don't know, but that seems to be where we're heading. But at the same time, like we're going to have to go through all this again here in just a couple months, and probably less than a couple months, and the same with government spending to get us through the rest of the fiscal year. So it's going to be really interesting to see what plays out. But going back to the $3.5 trillion, so Democrats, that bill we know right now at this point is not going to be $3.5 trillion. Manchin has said he won't go higher than 1.5. Sinema, it seems that Democrats are doing everything they can to lose Sinema.
Yes.
including chasing her into a bathroom.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, if she announced tomorrow that she's switching parties, I wouldn't be shocked. I mean, I don't think she will, but
she won't.
That would be less surprising than her coming out and saying she's suddenly in favor of the $3.5 trillion bill.
I mean, like, here's the funny thing about it is I actually think it's less likely that Manchin switches parties than Sinema, but Sinema has the least to lose by doing it. So, because I mean, and that's the thing, like John Gabriel, for those of you who don't know John Gabriel, he's from Arizona, and he had a really good piece at National Review talking about Sinema and how Arizona is not a Republican or a Democratic state. It is contrarian. And that Sinema, that's why McCain had such a good reputation as being a maverick.
And Barry Goldwater before him, right? I mean, Barry Gold.
None of these three people are the same, by the way.
Yeah.
You know, if you were to line up Sinema, Goldwater, and McCain side by side, I don't think you could find 5 things that each of them had in common.
That's the
Right.
really funny thing about it, because Sinema is obviously has turned into a bit of a fiscal hawk. She had, and this is someone who was a Green Party activist 15 years ago.
Yes.
Right.
But she's turned into a fiscal hawk, and she knows her state, and
Yep.
she cares about bipartisanship. Good for her. McCain, largely the same. He hated earmarks. He was a fiscal hawk. He was a contrarian on a lot. He supported campaign finance regulation. And we get to someone like Barry Goldwater, because everybody talks about how, well, it's like you're a Reagan Republican, you're a Goldwater Republican, or you're a Trump Republican. No. There was the Goldwater Republican, and Goldwater supported gay rights long before it was a popular national opinion, let alone a popular Republican opinion. And it's still not a popular Republican opinion.
Reagan was a Goldwater Republican.
That's right. And remember, Goldwater is the person who, when talking about gays in the military, he said, "I don't care if you are straight. I care if you shoot straight." That's so she's pretty interesting when it's all said and done. Scott,
I thought Biden had an interesting reaction when somebody asked, because we've been told as Republicans that, we're responsible for ending civility in politics and political discourse.
Yeah.
And along come the people who chased this lady into a bathroom, a U.S. senator, while she's at home teaching a college class. They chase her into the bathroom, and the president of the United States is asked, Joe Biden, Mr. President, is it appropriate what happened to Senator Sinema? Well, it's just part of the process. It happens to everybody, and he brushes it across, and that's exactly the way he said it.
He clarified everybody who doesn't have Secret Service protection, he said.
Right.
Which basically means him.
Yeah, I mean, it does. Yeah, unless you're me
and the vice president.
Yeah, that's it. But his reaction was so blasé and dismissive. Had that been Trump supporters chasing her in there,
oh gosh,
could you imagine what his reaction would have been?
Yeah.
The hypocrisy is just stunning. That's all. And I don't agree with Senator Sinema. I'm glad she's there, and I'm glad she's holding the line on this issue. But nobody should be treated that way. Nobody should be chased into a bathroom. That's not appropriate.
Schumer said it was something that happens, and it's like, I don't know. I know a lot of politicians, and I don't ever recall any of them telling me stories about how they were chased into the bathroom followed to the bathroom by protesters.
We did see, right? Ted Cruz was confronted. There was was it 2 summers ago? People were confronting people in restaurants as they were trying to eat dinner.
McConnell got confronted.
Ted Cruz. And then, there was a very scary, to me, the scariest video I recall seeing was there was some sort of a event in Washington. Maybe it was something to do with Supreme Court. A lot of prominent Republicans were there. Rand Paul and his wife come walking out, and they are surrounded by this mob of people. Especially
that was the RNC. They hosted it at the White House.
Right? And especially in light of what happened to Rand Paul, where his neighbor, almost killed him. Honestly, hit him so hard that it broke his lung and so forth. You could just. Yeah, that was a very, very scary moment. And so
I think it broke his ribs and punctured a lung.
Yes. Yeah. And he was on his back.
But you talk about those protesters, because they were following Senator Paul and his wife Kelly,
right,
who is the sweetest person in the world.
Right.
But they were following, because I know Scott and I have met Senator Paul. I don't know if you've ever met Kelly, but Kelly's just so nice. But they were leaving the White House after Trump's acceptance speech for the nomination. And they were surrounded by people who were calling, say her name, referring to Breonna Taylor. And it's like, dude literally introduced a bill called Breonna, it was to end no-knock raids, and it was named after Breonna Taylor.
Right. Yep. Right. Yep. This goes to the whole misperception of Republicans all the time type of thing. Here you have a Republican who tried to lead on the issue, introduce legislation on the issue that you are protesting and trying to scream and yell at him in public for, to say that he needs to go do that. And he's already done it. Because people have a misperception of what Republicans are and what they stand for, and whether or not they stand on principles or whatever. Well, here's the most principled guy, and you're attacking him for something that he agrees with you on.
Yeah,
and this is the last thing I want to say about this whole thing is that, again, I was told that Trump needed to get out of office in order for us to restore civility in our political discourse. And the president of the United States, the current sitting president of the United States, looked into a reporter's eyes and said, happens to everybody. It's part of the process.
Talk
And that's
about
just not
busting
acceptable to me.
norms.
It's
I'm talking
not
about
acceptable.
That's busting norms right there.
This stuff backfires. I mean, and like, and I get I know Democrats have a sense of urgency because all things taken into consideration, Republicans are likely to take back the House. You know, I mean, going into January 2023. So they're feeling rushed to try to get this stuff through. And like I said, I get it. But at the same time, like going up to or have these activists who want to see this agenda pass, going up and threatening Democratic politicians or even Republican politicians, doesn't matter.
Anybody.
It's not going to push them into a place of supporting you. They're not. They're like, because ultimately, like you run a progressive against Sinema, and I guarantee you that progressive will lose in Arizona.
Yeah,
you have, in order to win in Arizona, you have to have someone like Sinema or Mark Kelly.
And look, and Manchin's probably equally unbeatable in West Virginia. And there were people who kayaked up to his houseboat to surround it, and he actually spoke with them and engaged with them. But yeah, it's not the way to go about things.
No, it's
Right.
it's certainly not. But go ahead, Scott.
You just don't need to do that, and it doesn't matter what party the person is from, whether it's a Democrat like Senator Sinema or a Senator Manchin or a Senator Rand Paul, who is of the Republican Party. It doesn't matter.
Yeah,
it doesn't matter. Stop doing this garbage. And that's exactly what it is. It's garbage.
Yeah. So, but the long and short of it is, I can't wait for the next Congressional Budget Office 10-year budget outlook to come out so I can look through the numbers, because we are so beyond screwed right now.
Yes.
So we're already at 100% debt to GDP ratio, and it's not going to get better anytime soon. And people can go back and say, well, Bush tax or Trump tax cuts. That was a $1.5 trillion deficit that was provided for in that budget. 2019 was in recent years, going back to the Great Recession in 2007, 2008, 2019 was a success story. Do I think that Trump produced the best economy we've ever seen? No, I don't. I think the economy under Bill Clinton was pretty good and better than what we saw under Trump. That said, looking comparatively over the years that preceded it, going back to the Great Recession, it was a pretty good economic year.
Sure.
I would certainly take that than over where we are right now.
No doubt.
But so I think the Trump tax cuts, which, I mean, I hesitate to say that they should be called. Trump would have signed any bill that had a tax cut in it, but I don't think you can even complain about $1.5 trillion, given that the budget that the bill that they want is $3.5 trillion.
Right.
Like,
and look, the progressive,
one of those things is not the same number as the other.
Right. And Bernie Sanders and AOC consider the 3.5 a compromise, because Bernie wanted $6 trillion.
Which saying those words, saying that this is a compromise, does not make it true.
No.
Right. Well, Joe Manchin says I was at 0 and I compromised by getting to 1.5.
If I took, so I had to go. I went to Guitar Center today. If I took you guys with me and I said, so I see that $4,000 Fender Telecaster, you don't have to get me that one. Go get me the $3,000 Gibson 335. It's a compromise.
Yeah. I can imagine your wife thinking, "Oh yeah, okay, we compromised with a $3,000, and that's great for our budget."
It's a load of horse shit. That's what that
is. Well, that's who's in power right now.
That's Washington math, right? I mean, that's Washington math for you.
Yeah. So she who shall not be named has an opinion on Buckhead City. Buzz, I'm gonna let you take this one.
So I think it points to a problem that the Buckhead folks have. They have a lot of support. How much support they have within the area. We've talked about this before. A listener of this podcast claims that they have enormous support, and he may be right. We'll see, but it doesn't. I don't think it helps them. She who now shall not be named is not. There are a lot of Republicans in Buckhead. They are not that brand of Republican, and her endorsement of this effort, I don't think, gains them one single vote. Now, I
clearly, it's an effort to bring attention to herself, because she is self-serving, and I will name
now. She has a primary opponent. It's what seems to me to be a successful businesswoman primary opponent, but that probably has that she's out there fighting crime, fighting
So,
crime.
I have an amendment to make, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, Buzz. We'll go back to this in a second. But on the previous segment, I just got a text message from someone who is watching live and says one point about the GOP tax cuts. This year, we have the highest tax revenues as a percentage of GDP since the 1960s.
Yeah. Hey man, that's Art Laffer, the Laffer curve. How you can cut taxes and increase revenue.
Voodoo economics, right? Isn't that what Bush called it?
So I didn't mean to cut you off.
Supply side economics. Come on.
I didn't mean to cut
respect
you off.
to
I didn't want to cut you off, Buzz, but
Jude Wininsky.
But I felt that was, considering who it came from, was a compelling piece of information.
No, that's a good.
But
that, I mean, we don't have to belabor this point. I think, there were Greg Bluestein of the AJC was tweeting about this, that he was receiving word from insiders who were saying this is the kiss of death upon our movement. And I don't know if it's that severe.
Well, if Marjorie Taylor Greene actually cared about the outcome, she wouldn't have weighed in. But it was an opportunity for her to look strong on crime. And so she took it for herself. Yeah. And that's what Marjorie Taylor Greene does.
Yep.
She tries to bring attention to herself to make herself look like that classic political fighter that she's tried to make herself out to be.
And look, she may think it helps her in her district, but I don't think her constituents in her district care about Buckhead either.
Well,
and why should they?
It's just an opportunity
care about their district.
It's just an opportunity for her to point to other Republicans, say, I'm willing to fight when others aren't. Yeah. And it's an argument on her own campaign trail. She obviously, clearly, she has to understand that there are people who look at her and laugh within Republican circles here in Georgia. She has to understand that. And so at this point, so I think her getting involved in trying to do this, it had nothing to do with actually it passing. It had everything to do with her and her ability to make arguments on the trail. And
look, she's not in the Georgia legislature, who are the people who have to consider the bills that are being proposed. She has nothing to do with this. Another possibility here is that she sees something that she thinks is popular that might pass and wants to attach herself to it so she can claim credit. But the success or failure of this movement has nothing to do with she who shall not be named.
Scott doesn't like my.
We
got to find an acronym for that. We don't want to use her acronym, but we got to.
I'm just going to name her. I'm not going to give her that type of power.
No, so, I like not naming her.
So one thing this came out of I saw this on Twitter earlier this week or over the weekend, maybe, I don't remember which, that the Department of Justice is getting involved in a lot of these school board fights over mask mandates and so on. Not over mask. Well, some of it's been over mask mandates, but also over critical race theory. And they're going to be pushed
alleged
threats, things like that. And I've seen a lot of right-wing reaction to it, saying that this is DOJ persecuting political enemies, going after things they don't agree with. But some of these school board meetings that I have read news stories about or watched video of, some of the people who are speaking at these are borderline. Well, some of them are borderline. Most of them are crossing. Some of them are crossing the border. Not most, but some of them are crossing the border into threatening, intimidation, so on. That is potentially could be prosecuted. So I don't know if either of you have seen this, but
we've seen it here in Cherokee County, where people have been very passionate about the mask mandate and critical race theory and other issues, and they're passionately engaged at every meeting. We recently had one meeting that got adjourned early because people were screaming and yelling while other people were trying to speak. And the interesting thing for me about that was there was another time in Cherokee County where some fairly controversial things were happening. We had a school board member who had done some things that were illegal. She actually went to prison for, and a couple of the members of the delegation, including myself, would sit in the back of the room and we would watch quietly. And one of the people would chastise us for not saying anything, for not getting rowdy, for not getting loud. That person now sits on the board at Cherokee County School Board and was the one who called for an end to the meeting when things got heated. So the irony on that situation wasn't lost on me, but there is a difference between being passionate and being loud and potentially even rowdy as a crowd to let the people know, let the electeds know that you're not happy with what they're doing or their policy decisions. And that's completely different than threatening violence, which is what we've seen sometimes happen around the country. Now, again, it doesn't, I haven't seen anybody threaten violence at Cherokee County School Board meetings. I watch them occasionally online when they're streaming. I used to attend every single one of them, but I don't anymore. There's a little bit of an overreaction, I think. I think here there was an article today that was posted. Maybe it was the AJC, where one of the Gwinnett School Board members was talking about, yeah, we want to be part of that. And the state school board was like, well, we haven't actually heard about any threats of violence in Georgia.
Yeah.
From around the state. There are people who are very passionate. Now, the thing about DOJ is, are they going after the people who have crossed that line, or is it more general? Because people don't trust the government. And if they start cracking down on a few, it's going to look like they're cracking down on all of them, because generalization is a dangerous thing, right, Jason?
Well, let me, a couple of things about this. Gwinnett has had these very passionate meetings. There was an incident back in May when a school board member said she was threatened. Police looked into it and did not do anything, did not make any arrests at that school board meeting. They talked to people. The police diffused the situation and sent everybody home, which police often do, which is what I think what we want police doing. I don't think we want police arresting people, anybody who loses their temper. But that was not good enough for our newly elected solicitor, who called a press conference the next morning with this school board member and demanded, and it claims to have launched an investigation into the conduct of the police. Now, that was in May. Here we are in 1st of October. He has not announced the results of that investigation. So my guess is that he has concluded that the police acted properly and doesn't want to show that he was politically grandstanding. But yeah, Jason, you're right. There have been threats. There are threats. There have been a lot of people who have crossed the line at various meetings across the country, and probably here in the state of Georgia as well. I would commend to you, all of you and everybody listening to this, to go to National Review. Andy McCarthy, former federal prosecutor, who wrote an article today, and it had some very interesting facts in it. If you remember, in the early 90s, we had the first attack on the Twin Towers. Andy McCarthy was the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, who prosecuted the people who did that, including a man known as the Blind Sheikh, who was the instigator of these things. He was an imam who taught at a mosque, and oddly enough, Merrick Garland, who's now the Attorney General, was working in the Clinton Justice Department. And of course, Andy McCarthy had to go to the Clinton Justice Department to get approval to prosecute the Blind Sheikh. And according to his article, McCarthy's article, Merrick Garland was overboard in making sure that expressing that our First Amendment protects all sorts of things being said, especially at the federal level, federal law. He had to walk a very fine line about prosecuting the Blind Sheikh for things that he said. And so McCarthy makes the point that he's very puzzled by Merrick Garland's conduct now, saying that he's going to go after, that they possibly will, they haven't announced what they're going to do, but convening all these departments of the Department of Justice to come together to look at these threats at school boards, because according to McCarthy's view, there's no federal law being broken. Now, it may be a violation of state law to say I'm going to punch my school board member in the nose. It may be or may not be, depends on the state. But it's not a violation, according to McCarthy, it's not a violation of federal law. So what exactly is the federal government going to do? And we should point out that this is done by Merrick Garland as a reaction to the National School Board Association asking that these people be declared domestic terrorists and that the Patriot Act be invoked to move against these people who are protesting at school board meetings. So yeah, Scott, you mentioned that this might be an overreaction. I think it's a gross overreaction because any incidents that might happen There have been people arrested at school board meetings. There have been scuffles out in the parking lots, etc. The letter from the National School Board Association mentioned one person who got arrested. One.
Which part of the Patriot Act do they want to invoke? Because the most controversial, well, some of the most controversial provisions expired last year, like last March.
Yeah.
So we're coming up on almost 2 years of the Patriot Act. At least Section 215, the business records, lone wolf provision, those have all been expired. So,
but I think to me, what, and this is part of what McCarthy is saying in his National Review piece. Okay, the federal government's hands are what the actions that the federal government take are very limited in actually prosecuting people, unless they can uncover some massive organized nationwide scheme to go and threaten school board members, which I doubt they will.
The intent these
are folks who are mad about mask mandates and other things. And there's been a string. You can find these videos on the internet. There's been a string of moms who, and we can trace this all back to the pandemic, because parents are much more aware now of what's happening on a day-to-day basis in their schools than they ever were before, because they had to watch these classes on Zoom. There have been parents who have found what they felt to be objectionable material, even sexually suggestive material in books that their middle schoolers and elementary kids checked out of libraries. So they marched down to the school board and hold up the book and say, why is this book that has this passage being given to my 10-year-old? And I think those are, and they look, some of these moms have been really mad. No doubt about it.
Well, clearly they never read the Song of Solomon, but that's neither here nor there.
That's true.
Scott, go ahead.
The thing here is, it's not about what they have the authority or constitutional authority to do, or whether they'd invest and arrest people. This is an intimidation game.
Yeah.
That's what this is. This is using
a chill on free speech is what this could do.
That's exactly what they're trying to do. They're trying to chill people from. It's exactly it. Yeah. You nailed it, Buzz. It's a chill on free speech. That's what it's an intimidation game, completely and totally. It's exactly what they're using, what they have to bully as a bully pulpit, to scare people into not showing up and to not being part. Don't be there, because if you are there, you might get arrested or associated with a group of people that could potentially be labeled terrorists. And by the way, if only there was somebody who could have said that the Patriot Act would be problematic towards American citizens at one point in time. If only there was somebody out there that could have said, this is bad news.
Shame on us, neocons.
Yeah, I mean, really.
We only protected you from terrorist attacks in the homeland for 20 years, so whatever.
Oh, my God. Thank you, Marco.
Yeah. Jason and I are going to team up and beat up on Buzz now. Don't take that literally, Department of Justice. It's figuratively speaking.
There was a report that came out at one point, Buzz, that said that the Patriot Act was used in zero actual terrorism investigations. It had thwarted zero terrorist attacks, but it had been used in drug cases more than anything else. Like, that was the top end usage. There's
a whole Tom Clancy movie about that, right? They present a clear and present danger.
I remember being told. So I was told that by multiple people that when they passed this, that they basically, the legislation was already written and they just dusted it off and introduced it as the Patriot Act. These were things that the FBI always wanted. Right. And that's pretty much how it went. So,
but look, I guess circling back to the school board thing, just one last thing I wanted to say. We've all been at public meetings where tensions were high, and normally, if there's one law enforcement officer there in uniform, it's enough to restrain any troublemaker. Yeah. And so, I mean, obviously, nobody condones emailed threats or threats of violence or threats against the safety or life of any school board member or any school official anywhere. Nobody supports that. Nobody, but Scott mentioned earlier, here's Joe Biden saying it's part of the process to harass and follow a female senator into the restroom, but we're going to sic the Department of Justice on people who are ticked off about various things their school boards are doing. It's incredibly hypocritical.
It does certainly seem like a massive overreach and a massive overreaction as well. And one thing I do want to know, if we're paying attention to what prominent federal education officials say, the Randy Weingarten, I believe, said it was like praising
Tell people who she is.
Yeah, I can't remember which organization.
American Federation of Teachers.
American Federation of Teachers. So she tweeted out a picture of a mom and the mom and a kid, and the mom had put their child in another school district because one that required mask mandates, basically saying that she was proud of the mom. And like it was funny to see so many conservative school choice activists, libertarian school choice activists basically say, thank you for the endorsement of school choice. This is exactly what we've been saying. Yeah,
I tweeted at her.
One.
Yeah, and look, the behavior of the teachers unions, and yes, I know immediately I'm going to get an email saying there's no teachers unions in Georgia.
Page,
they're here, but they don't have collective bargaining agreement.
Right.
Okay, in Georgia, bargaining power.
My mom was a member of Page for years.
Page has Activism Day at the Capitol every year. Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
But they have done more. This is why charter school enrollment is up 9% in the state of Georgia. This is why the Census Bureau says that now 16% of households are homeschooling at least one of their kids. This is why enrollment overall in public schools is down 3% over pre-pandemic levels. And this action by the Department of Justice, is only going to enhance that. There are going to be parents who are going to say, enough of these people, I'm out of here.
Yeah.
So, as they should.
With that, we're out of time. Though a couple of things I do want to note real fast. Georgia did beat Arkansas this past weekend, 37-0. We got Auburn this week. Georgia Tech, I did note, Buzz won their game this weekend.
No, we got pounded. It was.
Oh wait,
it was,
I thought you guys won.
No, Pitt. Look.
Oh no, wait. I just wanted to hear you say that Tech lost.
We have a very young team that does not understand yet that you have to give the same level of effort every week. They thought they could just cakewalk in, and Pitt is an underrated team. Pitt's a pretty good football team. They were underrated. They took Tech to the woodshed.
Pitt hasn't had a good football team since Dan Marino was quarterback. So
no, they got a pretty good one now. Their quarterback is one of the top 5 passer in the.
Are they ranked?
No.
Okay, that as if to prove my point.
All will be better. We travel to Durham to play lowly Duke, so if we should right the ship this week. And
well, this will make you feel good, Buzz. Kennesaw State, which Georgia Tech beat earlier this year, pounded Jacksonville State over the weekend, which beat Florida State earlier in the year as well. So you have that.
Ergo, we're ACC champions.
Right.
Isn't Jacksonville State coached by our friend Deion Sanders? Right?
No, that's Jackson, not Jacksonville State. So,
I am pulling for 60 points against Georgia Tech. So
over under 60 points. Take him up on it. Bet the Black Label Coke Zero. It's worth money.
I'll take it.
All right, folks. Have a great rest of your week.
We play great in great games. We just stink against team games we should win.
I'll just go back and point that you guys have beat us 3 times in the last 20 years.
Well, that's why they forfeited last year.
Okay. With that, folks, we are out of time. We'll see you next week. Have a great rest of your week. Peace out. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.